Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'm inviting you to join me as I prepare some weekend meals, bake some sourdough bread as always, and chat about our weekend routine, especially how it ties into food preparation. Cooking from scratch is super important to me, but I also want to make sure we have time to relax, enjoy the outdoors, or even take a short trip sometimes, especially if the weather is nice over the weekend. So I'll be sharing a few tips that help me balance from scratch cooking with making the most of our weekends as a family, and I hope you'll tag along. Here you can see me starting on some sourdough baguettes. Not exactly a weekend staple, but my son requested them after spotting what he called the very long bread at the store. I always go into challenge accepted mode when he asks me if something can be made at home. And while I usually stick to simplified sourdough, this time I decided to make a levain, or leaven as it's called in English. Basically, instead of mixing the dough all at once, you first mix a bit of starter, flour and water to create the levain, let it ferment and then use it just like you would use a starter. A levain can do a lot for bread, especially sweet doughs, but in this particular case I'm using it to bring down the sourdough tang of these baguettes. I really wanted them soft and almost a little sweet, the way I know my son imagined them. And spoiler alert, it worked perfectly. The challenging part about making sourdough baguettes for me isn't the shaping, it's the transferring them from floured kitchen towels to the baking sheet after the second rise. It's a bit tricky but definitely doable. Just make sure to generously flour the kitchen towels beforehand so the dough doesn't stick. And scoring baguettes is also a bit harder than scoring a regular sourdough loaf, but in my opinion, again, totally worth the effort. I'll leave a printable version of the recipe down in the description box below if you're interested, and I suggest you give them a try because they are really fun to make. I've made them a few times now and they are a great alternative to a regular loaf, which can get a little boring if that's all you're baking. Switching up shapes makes it fun for me again. Last weekend we spent the whole day at my in-laws' farm, and I love that my kids get to see how animals are raised and where our food comes from, and most importantly, they find everything about the farm absolutely fascinating. I guess animals are interesting to all kids, but mine are genuinely impressed every single time we go, even though we're there almost every weekend. You think it might lose its charm by now, but nope, not at all, and I'm very happy about that. Since our Saturday was mostly spent outdoors and away from home, Sunday was reserved for catching up on some home tasks. I find that planning weekends this way makes a big difference. Of course, there are weekends when we're on the go both days, but whenever possible, I aim to keep one day for staying home to stay on top of laundry, cleaning and food prep, at least enough to make Monday easier, and then the other day is the fun day. And on that topic, I also feel like social media these days tries to convince us that everyone is constantly doing something exciting, which simply isn't true or sustainable for most people. You'll see Instagram stories of friends and people you know out and about, doing fun and adventurous things, and it sometimes feels like you're the only one taking it slow. But the truth is, those are just a handful of people you accidentally see stories of. Maybe 10 friends are really doing something special that day, while the other 200 are just at home, relaxing or catching up on everyday tasks. Yet somehow we perceive it as if everyone is taking a long trip or doing something exciting, which can be overwhelming for a lot of people, and it leaves you wondering if you should do it too. And I totally get it. Kids can also put a lot of pressure on us to entertain them all the time, but that's just the way they are. We play and we go places together, but I think it's good for them to see that after that's over, there are things that we need to do, and if we do them together, they'll be done quicker, and then we have more time for each other again. So having one fun day and one mundane day over the weekend has been a game changer for our family at this stage. And if you're finding yourself feeling exhausted or even just more tired by the end of the weekend instead of feeling refreshed, consider giving it a try. It might just help you find the balance you need, and you don't have to feel bad about it at all. Now, as far as cooking over the weekend goes, I don't meal prep in a sense of having a strict meal plan for the week because I find it too confining. There's usually an abundance of some ingredient or another, and I prefer to keep a well-stocked pantry and then lean on seasonal produce, which isn't always predictable. What I do like to do, however, is prepare 2 dishes at once when I'm cooking. If I'm already by the stove, I figure I might as well make the most of it. This past Sunday, I made boneless chicken thighs in a creamy vegetable sauce with a rice mix for lunch, and at the same time, you can see me making chicken and carrot risotto for lunch the next day, so Monday. One thing I have to note here is that in much of Europe, we typically have our main meal at lunch and then we have a lighter breakfast-style foods for dinner. In southern countries like Italy, Spain, and parts of France, this often includes a siesta, which is a long break to enjoy lunch and relax even during work hours, before finishing the day with just something simple on a piece of bread for dinner or something. So if you see me cooking a whole meal, it's usually for lunch and not for dinner. One thing I always make sure to do on Saturdays, even if we get home late, is feed my sourdough starter. There's rarely a Sunday when I don't bake at least some bread for the beginning of the week, and more often than not, I'll bake something sweet too for dessert after lunch. This past Sunday, we were still outside a lot because the weather was unusually warm, so I decided to make something very hands-off and flexible, and that's sourdough focaccia. I do have a recipe for it, which I'll link down below, but the great thing about focaccia is that you really can't go too wrong with it. Since there's no real shaping involved, it's forgiving even if it is slightly under or over fermented, so it's perfect to mix up on a day when you're not really sure where you'll get to it next. I mixed up the dough on Sunday morning and left it to ferment, probably a bit longer than ideal since we were outside until late afternoon, but when we got back I transferred it into a rimmed baking sheet and decided last minute to turn it into a pizza-style focaccia. I poured some olive oil and tomato puree over the top, sprinkled it with oregano, made dimples with my fingers and let it rise for another hour or so to get a bit puffier. Then I baked it and we enjoyed it for dinner with a salad on the side. This recipe always works and that's why I also think it's a great beginner's recipe. You can't really mess it up and it's very versatile. On that note, when you need a decent meal on the table without spending too much time at the stove, the Instant Pot is truly a lifesaver for me. I had a big piece of pork to use up and not much time to cook it, so I chopped up some carrots, onion and zucchini that were also lying around. One tip I always follow is that it's worth taking a few minutes to brown the veggies first, even if it's just the onions, before browning the meat using the Instant Pot's sauté mode. It really brings out the flavor and makes a big difference in the final dish. After browning veggies, I poured in some water and set everything to cook and walked away. Since I didn't have time to roast potatoes on the side and I know I'd have a great gravy from the meat and veggies, I decided to cook some buckwheat instead as a side dish. Cooked buckwheat is a really common side dish in this part of Europe and people use it pretty much just as often as rice. And like rice, it's plain on its own, but perfect for soaking up sauces or gravies. If you've never tried buckwheat and can find it in your area, I highly recommend keeping some in your pantry. It's easy to prepare, it's versatile, and it's a great alternative when you want something just a little bit different. I was a bit unsure whether to show you this final dish I prepared over the weekend since it's not something many people outside my region of Europe are familiar with, but I know how curious I am about dishes from different parts of the world, so I decided to include it. Let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see more traditional European meals and I'll be happy to share them. This dish is called štruklji and it can be served either as a plain side dish or sweetened as a dessert. Though it's more like one of those simple filling desserts you can have for dinner, for example. We do it all the time and we did it like that on this Sunday as well. The dough is similar to what's used for other classic European desserts like apple strudel. You basically stretch the dough thin, spread over a filling, cottage cheese is the traditional choice here, then roll it up, cook it in a kitchen towel and slice it like a roulade. For my husband who prefers walnut filling, we made a walnut version as well. Traditionally, you top the slices with melted butter mixed with sugar and breadcrumbs and it's absolutely delicious. This dish is such a nostalgic one for me because my grandma used to make it at least once a month when I was growing up and it makes me so happy that I can now carry on that tradition for my kids. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I hope you enjoyed seeing what we've been cooking over the weekend and I love sharing these little pieces of my life with you. Don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts with me in the comments. I always love hearing from you. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos about sourdough baking, food from scratch and natural living. I upload new videos every Friday and I hope to see you soon. Bye!